Okay, I am so excited today that with our Agents of Change Continuing Education, we have Alana Weinstein with us, and we're going to be talking about neurodiversity and ADHD. And we're going to be talking about our own personal lived experiences, and then what are some approaches holistically, expressively that we can use to support our neurodivergent community. So my name is Megan Mitchell. I am the founder of Agents of Change Continuing Ed, and we have Alana Weinstein with us. So here's our quick little bios. We're not going to read it to you, but I can just quickly tell you a little bit about myself. So I am a child and adolescent psychotherapist in private practice. I'm actually very excited, Alana, to talk to you because I'm getting my play therapy credentials. So expressive arts
Ooh,
and play is a very fun part of my
amazing.
day. A little bit about my areas of interest. Neurodivergent learners has always been my area of interest, kind of from the get-go. I'm interested in tech. I'm interested in innovation, so how we can bring AI in. As someone with ADHD, my interests evolve, it seems, day to day, so I have a lot of interests. And then lastly, I'm interested in multicultural supervision and ethics and how we bring in intersectionality into talking about clients, talking about ethics, all of that stuff. And then lastly, I am a doctoral student at SUNY Buffalo. So I wear a lot of different hats, as would be someone that has ADHD. So that's a little bit about me. And Alana, I'll let you talk a little bit about you and what you do.
Well, Megan, I think we're in good company here. So I am Alana Weinstein. I see my role really as a hybrid misfit, a macro social worker, a Jewish artist, entrepreneur, right? Like, what does that even mean? Well, it's all rooted in my lens through Tikkun Olam, which means repair, heal the world. And how did I even get here, right? Well, I truly believe that my ADHD, when I was affirmed diagnosed nearly almost 3 years ago, it truly helped me step into myself, which is all of these things and more, and also has invited me into really creating and transforming the world through innovation and creativity that I always knew that I wanted, right, to do, but I was kind of like unsure. And so I've been working in the nonprofit sector for over a decade. Plus, I'm working across the country in different nonprofits, nearly over 20 organizations. And I am so thankful to my ADHD and to being neurodiverse and multifaceted and all the things because it has led us here, right, Megan? And I'm
Mhm.
so excited to dive in and dig into this conversation. I think it's really important for people to know about and to get more of a sense of awareness that maybe they also are neurodiverse and in many different ways as well.
Yes, I'm excited. We did a little pre-talk, Alana and I, and we could be talking till the sun comes down. So
Yeah, we definitely could.
we might have to do a part two to this because we can't cover everything that we'd want to
I
cover.
think we're gonna have to maybe like a podcast too or something.
Yeah, yeah. So we're in, like you said, we're in good company. So here are learning objectives for today. So participants will be able to define the terms neurodiversity, neuronormative, and neurodivergent. I'm just going to quickly go over that language because it might be new to some people and how we are going to
Yeah.
frame the conversation today. Participants will be able to identify therapeutic modalities and creative interventions that resonate with neurodivergent individuals. That's us. And understand their integration into social work practices. I love that you have the macro lens and then I have more of that clinical lens. So I'll be really curious to pick
Yeah.
your brain about that. And then we will get into a small conversation about how we can evaluate the societal challenges faced by the neurodivergent community and how we can advocate for that, strategize. What can we do to be more inclusive of all brains, all learning styles, all people? Why is this important? It's important for a variety of reasons because I very much like you take a holistic approach. We can't just pathologize a person and say, here you are neurodivergent, and now we're going to cure you or fix you. So there's tons of interventions, and it's very strengths-based and very person-centered. So I'm excited to talk to you kind of about the artistic interventions, spiritual interventions, and for me, playful interventions, because I incorporate play a lot. We want to challenge misconceptions. I think there's so many myths and just wrong information, frankly, out there about what ADHD is, what neurodiversity is, what neurodivergence is, and how we can be more informed and inclusive in our practices. And then lastly, of course, we want to advocate. So how can we empower clinicians, providers to advocate for a more inclusive workplace, a more inclusive world, really, is what we are for. So how can we be more supportive and understanding? There's just so much, and I will say this topic is evolving. A lot of the research is like the research is just coming out. So some of the stuff might be new to some of our listeners, but I just say approach it with curiosity and an open mind. Okay. So we wanted to just get some words out of the way before we get into our conversation. But a way that I practice is I definitely work under the neurodiversity paradigm umbrella. And what that means is that neurodiversity is part of humanity, right? We all have brains, and the brains are so complex and diverse, right? So to me, neurodiversity just is working with people. Everyone's going to think differently, approach the world differently. So for me, that's kind of how I take the approach of when I'm working with people. And what I like about this approach is we're not pathologizing. So I've been in so many trainings where they're like, the DSM, throw that out, right? We have to do that. It serves a purpose, right? For billing, for, more of the medical model that we live in. We live in a society that does that. And we are not trying to, like I've said, cure neurodivergent. And what are we curing them from, right? That's very much what we're trying to move away from. We're trying to meet them where they're at. And we're trying to find ways of living in sync with how they are wired, right? We're not trying to change their environment. We're trying to adapt to their environment in ways that are going to serve them best. And then we can talk a little bit too, as we get into our conversation about ableism and oppression, and how there are definitely systems set up that are not neurodiverse, not neurodivergent affirming, and what that means for our clients. So that's just a little bit about the approach that we're going to be talking from today. And then we do want to define some key terms. Neurodiversity. I was in a training and they said, if you say that you work with neurodiverse clients, you work with clients because every mind is diverse. So neurodiversity just shows that our brains, our minds are diverse, and they all work differently and are wired differently. And brain functioning is going to be natural and valuable and variable, right? Like there's no two brains that are alike. So that's what neurodiversity means. We all have diverse brains. Neuronormative or neurotypical. I don't love this term, but this is the term that's out there in the literature that basically means there's societal standards of what is considered typical, a typical brain, which it's like, what does that mean? Because it's a brain and it's complex. But basically, if you are neuronormative or neurotypical, your brain pattern wiring falls into what society says is kind of like the typical configuration, right? You see the world in a certain way. It's very much a societal
the construct.
Yes, construct. And then neurodivergent is what, or ND is what I say here. A lot of it's just because neurodivergent can be a mouthful. It says that we all have people who are neurodivergent have different functions from what is neuronormative or neurotypical. And what that could be, it could be autism, ADHD, dyslexia. There's an umbrella of tons of terms, and that's actually expanding and evolving. So it's not you are neurodivergent if you have this particular condition. And I love this little brain map because I love brains. I think brains are so cool. But here is some of the different things that would fall under a neurominority or someone that's neurodivergent. So we have dyscalculia, dyslexia, ADHD, Tourette's, I like this acquired neurodivergence because life experiences could change, right? There could be medical things that change throughout. We know the brain adapts and it changes. Learning
Yeah.
disabilities, mental health, autism, dyspraxia, all of these could fall under neurominorities. And what I love here is you'll see in our little overlaps, it highlights the intersectionality of a lot of people probably fall under a few of these categories. But what I love about this graphic is it shows all of the awesome skills that a person brings, like creativity, honesty, hyper
Yeah.
focus. And I don't think we discuss neurodivergence from a strength-based approach enough. So that's kind of our ND 101 for our listeners. So yes. Do you have anything to add, Alana, about neurodivergence, neurodiversity, and kind of how you shape your
Hmm.
work from this lens?
Oh man. I think before I always knew that I was neurodiverse, neurocreative, like whatever you want to call it, basically. There's something going on that wasn't just like, oh, it's this. It's like many things. And I also think like being a woman,
Mhm.
you and I can relate to this. I think as we change, as we grow in this world, we also had we are in female, we identify as female bodies. And so I think that's also a really important conversation to have around this is that the information, the research is just coming out around other things like PMDD, which is connected to hormones. And I identify with areas of that. And so I think like every day new information is coming out. And what I think like the listeners should know is like don't assume that you know everything because it's all like it's every day is a new experience for someone who is identifying with any area of this. And just because this one person doesn't identify with one area doesn't mean they won't identify with another area, right? So I think it's also being very open-minded and willing to learn and be curious about learning
Yeah,
more about it.
that's such a huge piece. Like I said, it's just all about approaching with
Yeah.
curiosity. And
Hmm.
it's okay to not know it. No one's expecting someone to know everything about it. And as I progress and learn these things, I'm actually learning there's so much I don't know. It's like the more you know, the more you don't know. So for me too, I'm trying to like just be open-minded and learn. And there's some really cool stuff coming out. And I just like that we're having the conversation about it.
Hmm.
Like this was not a conversation being had even 5 to 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think it's kind of ridiculous that it wasn't happening, especially during the pandemic. I'm sure maybe you felt similar. I was going through so much, and my neuro or my stuff was coming into surface because like we're not in like a typical element of living. That's when stuff starts to come to root, right? And
Mm-hmm.
not from root, but like it's literally coming up from the ground into
Yes.
surface. So
I agree. For me, the pandemic was difficult because I thrive with like having social connection
yeah,
and
yeah.
very stimulated with a lot of different things. And that just was not possible during the pandemic. So it was definitely a very hard time for me as well.
Mm,
Feelings of I'm so bored, I don't know what to do. Feelings of loneliness because I thrive on
mm,
the social connection. So it was really hard to find a routine and a rhythm that was
yeah.
working for me.
That's so funny because for me it was the opposite. Like of course like I struggled like everyone else did, but my creativity literally was like the darkest of times. It tends to like ignite my creativity and my energy. So I think it's like also important to know where we are right now in the world and where we're feeling and that kind of thing as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I
You know.
say it was a struggle, but then I take a step back and I'm like, actually, I started my business during that time. So, yeah, I think
Yeah.
that it did create space to try. You had to try
Hmm.
different things, right? That
Yeah.
was time and that was actually a nice time to experiment with those things because it was like, we got nothing but time during this.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of know about your ADHD diagnosis, how this came to
Okay.
be, and then I can tell you a little bit about mine because I think we both, it sounds like, got later in life diagnoses of ADHD.
We did, yeah. Also, can you hear the outside? Is it okay?
Oh, no, I can't hear anything.
Okay. Okay, great, great. Because
Okay.
I feel like that's also like, having like being neurodivergent, like I always am like distracted,
Yes, yes.
right? So I think it's important to know where we are. And all right, so I'll take you back in time to during the pandemic. I think we all are going through something, right? Like I identified earlier in the conversation. And I currently, or at that time, was living in Colorado. My parents just purchased a townhome. I was living my best life. I was loving everything and also really struggling. I was working at an alternative charter high school. My caseload was growing. My students were really struggling. The families were having a really hard time, right? With I was working with the most vulnerable populations. And so I also think it's important to know like who we are and what we can handle, right? And so I was getting extremely burned out. And I'm sure you can relate to this. And I've been there so many times I can't even count, right? But during the darkest or the most challenging of times, like everything changed. And so I left Colorado. I came back to Michigan to be closer to family, as many of us did,
Mhm.
right? We needed our people. We need to be around familiar areas that help us in life. And essentially, I ended up going back to my parents' home after a different situation occurred. And I found myself in my parents' basement in my old art room that I like knew so much growing up. That was like my safe place to connect with myself and really feel at home. And so as I was going through this like challenging time, I started creating again. And it literally led me down this like I just show it because I think it's important. Let me like go get her.
I would love to.
And also shows that like we're mobile, like we're remote, right? So we can bring stuff over
Yeah,
that makes sense
that's
for
the
us.
part about it.
It's amazing. So there, since I do relate to, and I am a Jewish woman, I feel very strongly about that part of myself because it has also opened up a whole nother world and why I am here, right? And so there's this part in the Jewish calendar very quickly. It's essentially a spiritual awakening time of digging into our creativity. And so I started creating again, and I literally created a whole book or guide or art making healing journey basically. And every day and there's different elements of it, but I love this. Like this one's great because it like totally expresses and explains like my mind. Like
Your
I'm
brain.
not logical.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is like, hello, creativity is like bursting at the seams. And so the pandemic around that time, right, Megan, like of course, my mind and everything, like I think once you unleash your creative self, at least for me personally speaking, it also opened up a whole nother door that I needed to step into, which was my mental health. And I did that with the help of my therapist. And around the same time, and I saw her a few times, actually quite a few times. And I was going through a lot with another position I got into. It wasn't the right fit. I was feeling very stifled and very stuck in going back into 9 to 5 life and also not being in the right mode and a lot of other experiences that were not lending themselves to positivity, right? And so along that way, she was like, have you ever thought about maybe getting assessed for ADHD? And I was like, what does that even know? Like, I don't even know what that even means. Which I
Yeah.
thought I was stuck in my tracks. I was like, what? I know there's something, but like, is it this? And I'm still confused, to be honest, because I
Yeah.
have this report I got that's like, oh, I don't know, like 20 pages long, right? And when I tried talking to the person who assessed me, I wasn't able to get in touch with them because I also was living in a different state when I was getting
Right.
into it again. And, it's been nearly almost 3 years. It'll be 3 years in April. Okay, not 3 years, 2.5, whatever. What is time, right? And I still feel like I have these other mental health things that are
Yeah.
attached to this ADHD self or whatever you want to call it that have not been tended to, that have not been
Mm.
really cared for. And so I'm absolutely like in this like wilderness of like, who am I? What am I doing? And the only thing I know is I have to create.
Yeah.
So and connect to like my like spirituality um personally, right? And so that's what happened essentially. And that's where we are right now. And it's funny enough, I'm seeing a new practitioner next week and getting assessed for an eval again,
Hmm.
and potentially for there's a thing called GeneSight that takes your saliva and helps you figure out like the medication that your body
Okay.
can
Yep.
digest. And I've taken medication, right, since then, but I have not found the right
Hmm.
combination. So it's it's really tricky. I think that people need to understand, and listeners need to understand it is not a straight path. It truly feels like this. Maybe
Yes.
sometimes it feels a little like more like settled, but for me, honestly, it's been like this. And it still feels really confusing and very uncertain. And I wish there was more support and more focus around this, even
Yeah.
before I like stepped into this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you
Similarly,
for allowing. Yeah. Thank you for inviting me.
yeah, similarly, I am a later in life diagnosed ADHD, and by later in life, just a few months, maybe about half a year ago. And a little bit
Gosh,
about my
Megan.
story is
Are you also in your wait? Are you also in your 30s too?
yes, I'm 34. So I was
Okay, I'm 35. Yeah.
yeah. And how this came about was I historically as a child ran
Mm,
anxious,
mm,
and I had perfectionist, like extreme perfectionist tendencies. And my mom even said that she had asked growing up, like when I was growing up, like she, is it possible she has ADHD?
yeah.
And this was the 90s, and she was kind of told no, she's doing well in school, you would know. And the the
Wow, that's really interesting.
the sense in the 90s
Yeah. Yeah.
ADHD was for young boys who were
Yep.
bouncing off the walls. That was kind
Hmm.
of what was told. And um I similarly was seeing a therapist that said, has anyone ever said to you that you might have ADHD? And I said, I have thought something, right? Because I have a hard time sitting for long periods of time. I can be a total space cadet staring off into space. And then I get very hyper focused on things. I go
Yeah.
down a rabbit hole of hyper focus. And,
Days.
and that has led to some really cool things. But
Yeah.
and so now looking back, I'm like, I was always last minute. I couldn't organize my thoughts to even do something. So I'd be pulling all-nighters where other
Yep.
people were just doing
Yep.
the assignment. Testing was always difficult for me. I would be nervous, I
Mhm.
would be distracted,
Yep.
like staring all over the place. And so standardized tests were very difficult for me. And honestly, when there's a lot of stuff in my brain, I get irritable and I get overwhelmed and then I just shut down.
Yeah.
So that kind of led to
Mm-hmm.
where we are now. And I'm like, it was the first point in my life that I'm like, this makes sense. So me and my mom started to talk about a little bit about like growing up was there signs. I actually made her pull out all my old progress reports. And I'm like, there has to be something. Sure enough, it was like, has a great energy for learning, but could use study strategies or could use
Wow. Yep. Yep.
strategies, or it talks too much. All those things that I'm like, oh, okay, this all makes sense. So for me, it's been very,
Hmm.
very validating because I'm like,
Yeah.
not that I needed a diagnosis per se, but I'm like, it makes sense now. And I'm similarly, it sounds like to you, still just starting to figure out how my brain works and what that means and what my preferences are. And
Yes, Megan.
yes, it's been a very, I guess a long journey and not a long journey because it wasn't in my mind until recently. But now I'm super interested in learning about even the neuroscience of how our brains work and dopamine seeking. Yes, I need dopamine
Yes.
time, that type of stuff. So it's been really
Yeah.
a journey that I continue to kind of figure out and
Hmm.
work towards. But I have a question for you and like
Sure.
talk a little bit about your experience. Did you ever have that experience? This was me a lot growing up and even now feeling like people saying like you're too much or
Oh, all the time. And
yeah.
still,
Yes.
my parents even, they were like, Alana, like you're like tone it down, like you're too much right
Yes.
now. And
Yes.
I still get this, especially in professional capacities, where like I haven't let go, no shame, right? But in certain like professional settings, exactly what you're saying. Like I get really, I'm also very extroverted.
Yes.
And I get energized by being around people, right? So absolutely, like it's like an ulcer almost comes
Yeah.
out, and I have to be like, okay, like clearly they like I'm not wanted here.
Mm,
And then I have to like almost like it's a chameleon, like we can be very chameleon, like I
yeah.
think a lot of us. I'm not saying everyone is like this, but I think like me and you, like we've had to like adapt so much, and change so much that it's even hard to even understand like who are we,
Mhm.
because it changes. And I don't know, Samantha, it's like moving with me. But similar to you, Megan, like growing up and stuff, like I think we talked about this before. Like I also struggled a lot in school, and I was in the slowest math possible that I felt like I was stupid. Like I felt
Uh,
dumb, and I had a tutor, but it wasn't enough, right? Like, and
mhm.
I absolutely have a learning disability called dyscalculia. And I'm like, well, why wasn't I supported more in this? And I just think like why, right? I think that you and I personally, and I'm sure there's other people, other listeners that can relate to this, we've wrestled so much
Mhm.
because of not getting that validation. And I think it's really important that we as practitioners, right, like are specialized in these areas, because we need to help other individuals that are going down this path that don't even know how to even navigate it, because it's really complicated.
Yeah, I so resonate with that. And I think there's a lot of shame and pressure we put on
Hmm.
ourselves that like we should be producing at a higher level.
Yes.
And I work with children and teens, and a lot of times children that are neurodivergent said, why can't I do what my friends are doing? And I'm like, that's that's been ingrained in
Wow.
our culture now that like we have to perform at a very high level in what, in school and
Yeah.
um there's a lot of systems I think that are set up
Oh,
to really cater to one type of learning style and one way of being. So I think that it can really affect self-esteem just because
absolutely.
not understanding or not feeling like supported or understood or seen really is the big thing, seen for who they are. I think that can be a huge thing, and self-esteem can really take a hit because you feel othered, right? Like why
Hmm.
am I the one that is always too much, or why am I the
Yeah.
one that people say are too impulsive or too risky, those type of things.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so awesome to like be with someone who like gets it, and I don't have to explain it. Like it's like, yes, you're affirming like exactly how I feel. And like we need more conversations
Yeah.
around this. Yeah.
So I want to kind of take a
Yeah.
turn into the expressive
Okay.
component of our conversation. So I'm trying to get my play therapy credential. So I play a lot, which I'm a
Mm.
playful person. I'm a creative person, which includes sand tray and art and expressive drama, all these different types of things. How do you incorporate art into your work as a social worker?
Mm.
I know it's very important to you personally, but how do you think for someone that's neurodivergent, expressive or art modalities or creative modalities can really help meet them where they're at and affirm them?
Oh man, I think it should be the fabric, right, of like our existence. Like I truly believe like we're all very creative individuals. And like you said, I think society and the systems like they deconstruct like us.
Mm-hmm.
Um and like it's okay to be who you are. Like if you are someone, right, like us, that is really like widely creative, innovative, expressive, it's it's like for a reason, right? And so I think a big part is to acknowledge that someone is expressive, that they have to express themselves in this way to be okay, to being on this earth. I know for me, like if I didn't have art, like I probably wouldn't be here. If I didn't have the ability to connect with my higher power, like with my spirituality, like I wouldn't I wouldn't be here. And it's taken like quite a toll because I've been like kind of pushed or like forced, and I think like society has a way of doing this is like, oh, like, get your degree and then go into the workplace. And I think nonprofits are incredible places, but I do think sometimes that they're very traditional in
Mm-hmm.
the sense of like a 9 to 5, you're doing this mission, this is why. And the other part of you kind of needs to like not be there. Or not all of it, right? I'm not sure why it's going so slowly. If you can see that, but I hope that makes sense. I think that like the way that I've learned to bring creativity and spirituality into um my life is, like in grad school, I was introduced to a different like modalities in different areas. And I always knew I wanted to be like an art therapist. I still don't
Mhm.
know what that even like means, or how to like get there because it's really complicated. And I think like the systems and the way that we get there is it's so controlled, it's so constricted. And so I want to actually like create a whole new world of like how you can bring those things into your life without having to get into like the constructs that society puts on us or the constraints that we are often told that we have to follow.
Yeah. I have found that with my neurodivergent clients, they can tell me and we can connect in such a deeper way than talk therapy
Yeah.
through creative.
Yes.
Yes. For me, my big love is sand tray. I don't know if you use sand
Yeah.
tray at all.
I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, but especially for children, right? They're not,
Mhm.
they might sand is tactile, right?
Yes.
To create and build.
Yeah.
And for me, sand tray has been very powerful because they're processing their world in the sand. And it's just some of the stuff
Yeah.
that comes out is amazing that we would never get to by just straight talk therapy. So I think if you
Yeah.
are working with neurodivergent clients or
Hmm.
individuals, you have to be creative, right? Like you might have to try
Absolutely.
many different modalities to see what sticks. Because some of my clients are sand trays not
Yeah.
for them, and maybe expressive arts are for them, so they're going to act something out for me, that type of thing. So I think it's
Hmm.
about allowing space for people
Yes.
to
Oh my
explore that.
gosh.
And I have a question for you.
Hmm.
How do you think, for our listeners, how do you find someone that's a good fit if you are neurodivergent? Or how do you know if someone's going to be a provider that's a good fit for you?
I think it's a really like hard question. And I actually want to go back to what you said about like going away from talk therapy because I'm also trying to find a practitioner
Yeah.
or therapist that I can work with that is not just talk therapy because it doesn't, I think for some of us, we need more, right? And when I am creating with my like color pencils, which are like my preferred medium, let me bring them over to you because I feel like it's funny
Oh,
how many I have. Like, look at this, Megan. Like, do you see
oh my
this? Oh,
gosh.
yeah, a
Mine's
little
pens.
ridiculous.
I love pens. Anytime I see pens in a store, I'm buying them. So mine's pens.
Yes. So I love pens too, but color pencils, like they've always like felt like my thing, ever since I was young. And I think it's also really important that we explore like different like modalities. I've been really interested in like EFT. I've done a little bit of that like emotional freedom tapping, right? Like where
Yeah.
you point or tap on the meridians. And I would love to be certified. Like, so I
Mm-hmm.
want to combine like art, EFT, spiritual, like there's a lot of different, and also yoga, but like there's so many things. And so I think like or like I feel like finding someone who like gets you is you need to spend time with them and really like and not just be like, okay, like I see this person for a consult and this is my therapist. I also feel very, very strongly that like many of us have like an intuition, like a gut that tells us, hey, this is not the right the right thing. And so I think also trusting that like our bodies also know a lot, and it's connected to our mind, and we can go into a whole conversation about that
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, and I tell people not everyone's going to be the right fit for you. And
No.
okay, as someone that works in clinical practice,
Yeah.
it can be hard, but even I sometimes know that this isn't going to like I think
Hmm.
you can feel it on both sides, right? I
Yes.
tell like maybe my style is not going to be a fit for this person. So I try
Yeah.
to be very obviously I work with kids, so sometimes it's their parents that are
Hmm.
acquiring, and I say, let's bring the kiddo in and see how the first session goes. Because
Yeah.
I could maybe not connect with the parents, but then I have a great connection with the kid, or vice versa. Like the parents could be really sold on it, and then the kid comes in and they don't want to be there. And it's like, so for me,
Hmm.
I have to manage that because I work with kiddos, which means I work with parents. But like you said, and there's no shame in advocating for yourself to say, you know what, there's like a lot of times we feel bad, right? We don't want to hurt someone's feelings, but it's what do we need? And you're going to get farther in the therapy
Yeah.
process if you have someone that you connect with. It's kind of a waste of everyone's time
Yeah.
if you're not on the same page.
Yeah, and also I think like talk therapy is it's for some people, right? But personally, and I know you relate to this, is like we need more. It's like because we're
More
often into
choices.
stimulation, and oftentimes like you're talking about the same thing. It's like, well, it's not really getting to that pathway that like I know I need to like address.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So I know that you're really big into healing and repairing. How do
Hmm.
you envision a world that's inclusive of the way people's brains work and understanding that everyone's brains work a different way? How do we get to that point of healing and repairing? And how, as social workers, can we start to educate ourselves or advocate to be more inclusive, specifically around neurodiversity and neurodivergence?
Yeah, well, I love this. It's such like a broad, you might have to break it down a little bit for me to like remember what you
Yeah.
said, but I think the biggest thing that we need to look at is our system,
Yes.
right? What is going on at our policy level, across the country? Like, are people talking about this? Like, what kind of, advocacy is around creating more space and more resources around this? That are it feels like kind of like new agey, right? It's like a whole nother like world that I feel like we're creating, and I think it's incredible, and also like of course like challenging because it is newer.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, well, it's like the revolution. Like we have to be the change, we want to see in the world. And I really do believe that like we can do so much like healing and really coming together more. I truly believe like art is
Mm-hmm.
the answer. And so how do we do that, right? Well, first of all, giving more access and resources to individuals that can benefit from these. Um, creating pro bono services where they
Yeah.
can take an art class, right? Or play therapy, or different like modalities like tapping or
Yeah.
other things. Like I think also I feel very, very strongly that nature is very
Yes.
healing, and so creating more access, right? And more of an opening for individuals to get that relief as well. I really think we're at this like very pivotal moment that is shifting and we're changing. And if people are, listeners are into like astrology, right, into different modalities, or going into the Aquarian age, which is all about like creating more space
Mm-hmm.
around healing, right? And so I think having these conversations more and more, and talking to people across the country that are doing different things and their practice and their business,
Yeah.
and opening the doors for more collaboration, I
Yes.
feel is essential, because I do think, and I'm sure you feel the same way, or can relate, we get very siloed and boxed
Yes.
in, and this is not helping us. We need to get more out there
Yeah.
together.
I so agree. It's got to be on all
Yeah,
different levels, right? Macro
absolutely.
work. You do macro work. It's got to be
Yeah.
yes, I work at the client level, but they exist in a world where there's systems, and
Yeah.
sometimes that can be resources, that can be financial barriers. So what do we do as clinicians? We have to advocate, right? And
Absolutely.
I think that there's so much that we can do, but I am starting to see that there is a shift with trying to be more inclusive, and you even see workplaces starting to do that, right?
Yeah.
I know some workplaces are definitely educating people on neurodiversity, neurodivergence. I think that a business, so we're talking more now like on a larger scale, an organization, business, corporation, there's actually studies coming out that businesses do better when they have a diverse set of minds, because they can have specialties, and like someone can be super creative, and that's going to bring more benefit, right? It's just great when we can live in a world where there is all type of brains represented, because there's a place for everyone and their skills and their unique strengths. So I'm hoping that we continue to move in that direction, but a lot of barriers are cost, right? Cost, access, and
Absolutely.
I have seen, I don't know if you see this, sometimes people don't take arts or expressive arts, I work play very seriously. I don't know if you see that too. It's that's not a manualized approach. Nope. So I would like to see people just be more open to trying these things. And I have seen people say, I use play a lot, and play is how children communicate. They're not going to have conversation with me of, oh, I'm having this very hard moment in my life and I feel shamed, right? They're going to show that through play of some sort. So I try to advocate for more openness towards expressive arts. They're not less than because they're more expressive, but I think that sometimes in society we want very research outcome based things, but there is research to show that these modalities actually are very, very powerful.
Yeah, you bring a really good point, and I totally like obviously like resonate with that, and I think it's really sad. Because I imagine that there's so many like listeners and followers are like, oh my God, like growing up, like I was like so creative, right? Like people say this all the time. Oh, I like dabbled, and you know, I was so like imaginary, and I went outside, and you know, I was like so like ignited by like my creative self, and I think it's really I think we have to we just take our power back. We just take our creative like energy back and be like, listen, like this is not, it doesn't have to be this way. And so I think like you're working with kiddos, like you're doing such important work, right? I don't work with children. I don't really like vibe with children in
And
that way.
everything's different, right?
Right. So it's important to know. I literally want to work with like burned out, like the most like traumatized like workplace, um specifically like women that are in like mid career level, but also like maybe are just starting out in their like nonprofit journey. And like selfishly, like I want to basically work with like someone that like is me, because I feel that like I have so much healing to do on my like own, but also like when we're helping other people on their like healing journey, it helps us, right? And then we're able to help even more individuals who are different, or have different like characteristics and different areas that they need assistance with.
I think that society, we don't value, some people
No.
do, but as a society we're more out
Yes.
based. And I've even seen some people that they want to explore the play and the but they haven't connected with that side of themselves in a really long time. So for me, I am so free and feel like best when I can play and create and do all these cool things. For me, that's how I connect. So if you are someone that's like, I'm not sure, like you don't have to do it necessarily in a therapeutic way.
No.
You can just go outside and lay in the grass. Put your feet in the grass. Like there's so many ways you can connect to your creative side without having to do it in a therapeutic way, right? There's definitely a place for it in a therapeutic manner, but just getting outside and being creative and
Hmm.
playing. How often do we play or create or express? Like you and I probably do a lot, but a lot of people
So
don't.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or even just like, okay, Megan, like I'm obsessed with like crystals and rocks. And it's also like different, like I have so many of them. It's not even funny. I have like a whole tray of them, right? Let me show you. But I think like different like things that people can connect with, like just
Good.
pick up a rock like outside or find crystals. I know it's a little woo, whatever. Or oracle decks. Like
Yeah.
there's just so many like different like areas that people don't even think about too. Um, that is non-traditional. That is more like
Traditional, yes.
outside the box. And I think we need to do more. We absolutely need to do more of that because if we aren't, then we're getting ourselves boxed in more
Hmm.
and more and more.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the rocks because I this is me when I go on a walk. I bring a bag and I'm collecting rocks, things
Yes.
that I can incorporate with my
Yeah.
kiddos because they like to
Amazing.
experience that.
Mhm.
I actually got some rocks, and what I have been doing with my tween clients, and they have loved this, is we paint the rocks and then we put like a feeling or an affirmation.
Yes.
So for example, I have some rocks and some say like rage, some say some don't say anything. They just have maybe a sticker or an image.
Hmm.
And that
Hmm.
has been so
Yeah.
powerful for my clients. I'll say, I'll actually, we call it our gratitude garden. And I'll get the rocks out and I say, pick something that's resonating or speaking to you today. And they just hold it and I say, you can share it with me. You don't have to. And just that piece, it's like
Hmm.
they have the
Hmm.
chance to connect with nature and to connect with how they're feeling. And I love, and they made these themselves. That's what's so great is they're empowered. And then the actually
Yeah.
come back to
Incredible.
me and said, who did someone pick my rock that I made? And I said, yeah, like someone did. And they thought it was so cool. And they felt so proud of that. So it's kind of coming full circle that they're sharing and connecting and creating. And there's that nature element too, that we now have this little gratitude garden at my office.
Yeah. And also it's eco-friendly, right? You're like, you're utilizing
Right.
resources,
Right. Because
right? And we're not just like, yeah.
we can buy a lot of things. So
Yeah.
I encourage, I'm sure you're very much, there's so, I went to a training, a sanitary training this week, and she
Mm.
said, do you know you can have a stick and a rock and you can create and you can do things with nature, leaves, grass. So I definitely am very big, like we've become such a thing that buy. And like
Yeah.
sometimes that stuff's good. There's a purpose and a place for it, but also what about the stuff that's just laying around, right? Like cardboard and all these different things that you can create with. And kids love that.
Absolutely.
Adults love that. I love to create with that stuff too.
Yeah, and like sticky notes and stuff. Like I went to like a workshop that was like intuitive cards, which like I would love to like create these with people, but like you can just create like your own like cards that like
Yeah.
speak, to how you're feeling and stuff. Or to just get into like that mode, right? Of like of
Different part of
creating.
our brain. Different part of our brain.
Exactly. And I wonder if I'm sure there's studies, right, Megan, about like how does your brain like change? Like I would love to like learn more about that. Sorry, the
Yeah. So
phone is like
I
weird right now.
thing that I'm getting very into is neuroscience and how the brain
Wow.
works. And you can constantly be readapting your neurons and your neural pathways. And what I found is kids actually and adults like to learn about the brain. And I'm like, how have we not talked about in grad school? I don't think for me, I ever
No.
learned about the brain and like brain chemicals and neurotransmitters. So that is super cool too.
Wow.
And nervous system too, right? A lot of things happen in
Yes.
our bodies because of our
Yeah.
nervous system activation. So I like the last thing I want to touch on is you
Yeah.
talked about burnout, and burnout is huge. And that has a lot to do with a burned out nervous system. Our
Oh
nervous system
man.
is totally activated in fight or flight all the time. So what would you give advice
Oh,
to like a
yeah.
couple pieces of advice if I mean, we work in a really tough field. We hold space
Yeah.
for a lot of people. And the world's a scary place right now. There's so much stuff. This week, particularly, like this month,
Man.
has been very hard. Um,
Awful.
what do you suggest for people who maybe are not fully burnt out yet, but maybe don't even know that they're starting to be on that path of burnout? What do we do?
Oh my gosh. I wish I knew the answers. I don't think we have the answers. as you know, it's very personal of
Yeah.
how individuals want to deal with their burnout.
Oh,
I
yeah.
know, like personally speaking, I have ignored like when I'm feeling exhausted, when I am depleted, or I am sure that you can understand this and like relate to it. So I think taking a step and being like, what's going on? Like, if you have to see someone about it, like
Yeah.
see someone about it. Talk to someone about it. I think a big thing too is like we spoke about in nature is a way to reset. It's a way to, get in touch with like our essence of like who we are, because when we're outside, it's a whole different zone that we're stepping into. And so I feel that go outside, like get some fresh air, take yourself away from screens as
Yeah.
well, and give yourself grace, because burnout is not it's not easy, and it really is quite a journey to go on. And even when we think we're not burned out, it's like, well, maybe I am burned out, right? And if I think like a big thing too is sometimes we have to fake it, right, to get through. And so also like what's going on in your life? Like what are areas that
Yeah.
maybe you could focus more on? Like is your mental health, like is that being addressed? Have you created, like what are you creating if you are someone who thrives in creating and connecting to different modalities, or different areas of your life that help bring you joy? What are
Yeah.
you doing in those, right? Are you connecting with the right people in your circle? I think it's really taking time to stop, to pause and see what's going on like in their environment, and then kind of like go from there, and reach out to individuals that you feel you can confide in, that are safe, that you feel you can be brave and share.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think a lot of
Yeah,
people, we have shame when we're burnt out. It's, oh, I'm
absolutely.
not doing enough, so I'm going to do more. And it's like that
Yeah.
actually perpetuates the cycle. And I did want to touch on how neurodivergent people might experience burnout. It might, you might be burnt out from your work, and in
Yeah.
addition, you're living in maybe a environment or world that is not catering to the way your
Hmm.
brain works.
Yeah.
So people might get overstimulated quicker, and that leads to burnout. Or someone with ADHD might really go down their hyper focus rabbit hole, and then
Hmm.
you're like, whoa, now I'm super burnt out and I have no capacity for other things. So I think it's knowing, and if you are someone that falls under this neurodivergent umbrella, which studies show it's about 15 to 25% of
Hmm.
the population is neurodivergent in some way, learn how your brain works. That's the best
Yeah.
thing you can do. And not everyone's going to understand how your brain works, but you have to understand how your own brain works first, right? And like you said, we're a journey. We're still figuring this out. Like I'm learning, I have some odd sensory preferences, and
Yes, me too.
I'm learning some interesting things
Gosh.
about myself. And I'm like, I have my headphones here because when I'm trying to
Hmm.
study, I have to have bilateral music going. I just cannot, otherwise
Mm.
I'm on Amazon shopping and I'm distracted. And even placement, like, do you sit by the window? Are you staring out the window? Like your environment, find an environment that's working for you, right? I'm
Yes.
in a library and sit where the lighting is
Yeah.
very artificial. Like make, the biggest thing I can say too is, I don't even know how we got off on this tangent, but your physical space is a really good starting
It
point.
is.
Feeling burnt out,
Yeah.
it's homey and something that you like, that you want to come back to and you want to reset in, right? So I think even just our
Yeah.
physical environment is so important. But caveat with, you might be in a work environment that's is overstimulating or triggering your nervous system in a certain way, where
Mhm.
you're like, maybe
Mhm.
you're working in the place where there's tons of loud noises and that's too much for you. So
Yeah. Oh
um,
my gosh. Or being underutilized too, which I've experienced so many times.
yeah, like understimulated, where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so bored and I'm just literally sitting
Yep.
at a computer. I have been in places, school, I was in school, so that was not understimulating at all. That was definitely overstimulating. But I've been in trainings and different things where you literally feel like you're just looking at the clock and it's going
Yep.
like minute by minute by minute. And that is painful. that is painful. So I would also say, be brave. You might need to
Yeah.
find an environment that is working for you better, and that's okay. And advocate for yourself. I think we are embarrassed sometimes to say, I
Hmm.
might need like more frequent breaks, or if I'm in a training, I'm going to be standing, or I'm going to be moving around, or I'm
Yeah.
going to be sitting on a yoga ball, because as you can see, I've probably wiggled a little bit throughout this, but advocate for what you need. There's no shame in that. And we actually have rights to be nurtured in a way that's going to work for our needs. So definitely
Oh,
do what you got to do.
yeah. It's like this conversation is like essential, right, Megan?
Yeah.
And I think we need to like talk more about this. Um,
Mhm.
before we get to the point where it's like, I just want to like run
Yeah.
away from my brain because often I'm like, it's so stimulated. Like when I'm creating, it's like a whole nother zone, right?
Mhm.
And I really feel like I'm like in a whole nother universe. And then it's hard for me to come back to earth. And I think it's also important, like, that we understand like different like energy source that we need too.
Yeah.
Or maybe we don't even know how to access, like you were saying, for like dopamine. Like I never drank coffee growing up, and now I drink coffee on the
Nice.
regular, nonstop, and tea, right? Um, and I like there's gotta be so many other like things though, like different like supplements, and I
And
just like where are
exercise
the
can be really good.
yes. Like when I do yoga, when I run, like I feel like my when I'm hiking, like, but
Yeah.
not everyone can have access to
I
these
know
things. So
that's the hard.
we need more, we just need more access.
And even
Um,
sometimes our basic needs, like I was having a
yeah,
conversation with someone, sleep is actually a luxury. How many
yeah,
people don't even have access to a bed every night, or have access to quality sleep, like or a diet that's well balanced. Like these are
yeah.
privileges that we
So
have,
many areas.
and we don't. I mean, I take them for granted for sure, right? I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go to bed at this time.
Yeah,
That not everyone has that luxury. It can be really hard. So take
very
care of
true.
yourself. If this is a lot, we're gonna have to do a part two and a part three and part four to
Or
this.
4, 5, 6.
There's so much we can talk about, but I'm really thankful for having you today here just to get the conversation going. And
Same.
we have the lived experiences, but that can only take us so far. That's our own lived experiences. Everyone's lived experience is going to be different. So I just want to thank you for taking the
Thank
time to
you.
be here today. And if you had one last piece of advice for those that are just curious about what neurodiversity is, like what would be your one takeaway? And then I'll give you my one takeaway. If I'm a clinician and I'm like, I get this. This makes sense to me, but I don't know like where to go with it. What would be your piece of advice?
I would say it's a whole no like another way of thinking and
Yeah,
doing and being. I truly believe like at the core. It's a
I
whole
love
nother way of
that.
living. Yeah.
It's very succinct. It's like, yes, it's just a
Yeah.
different way. And my piece of advice would just be curious.
Hmm.
You learn more about it. Like I'm
Yeah.
someone that can't stop learning enough because it's so interesting to me. So
Yep.
um take time, and you might not have time in your workday. Your workday might not be providing a training on this. You can Google, you can do a podcast. There's so many different ways to access information now. So I encourage all of our listeners to just step out of your comfort zone a little bit,
Absolutely.
and maybe even on
Yeah.
social media, I get a lot of interesting information from social media accounts. Just try
Hmm.
something new, whether it be a podcast, a YouTube channel, a book with a different perspective. There's so much stuff out there now that I think that and learn about the brain. Brains are so cool. I wish I had my brain because I have a little foam brain.
Yeah, we should do it next time. It'd be cool.
Yeah, learn
Really
about the
cool.
brain. I continue to learn about the brain and know how your brain works. It's a very fascinating, cool thing. So, we just want to, Alana and I just want others to just understand that neurodiversity is a thing. There's no hiding from that, and affirm those in your life or your clients or your systems that have brains that work in the way that they do. So
Absolutely. This was so great.
Yes, Alana, thank you so much for being
Honored.
with us today. And if anyone's interested in some of those neurodivergent, these are just kind of the basics, like I said. And notice here, they're all pretty new, 2015 and up, because this is really just starting to be studied further
Wow.
in academia. In academia, it's starting to be. But I just wanted to once again thank you so much, Alana. And I hope that our listeners took away some interesting points about learning about neurodivergence, and we will continue this conversation. There's so much more we could talk about. So thank you.
So much. Thank you. This is so great. And please, like, feel free to follow me. It's Jakuna Lana on Instagram. And I cannot wait to dig more into this
Yes.
conversation around the
Thank
soon.
you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this social work CE from Agents of Change. Want to earn your CE credits for this course? Visit agentsofchangetraining.com or the link in the description to purchase the course and take the post test. If you're looking for more CEs, check out our unlimited plan. You'll get unlimited access to 150 plus ASWB approved continuing education courses for one low annual fee. We're always adding new courses and bringing on new experts. Did I mention we also have 5 free CEU credits available too? Check it out at agentsofchangetraining.com.